Okay, are we on?
Yep, you should be live right now. Here we go.
All right, thank you so much. And everyone, welcome to the first Education and Wellness Committee of the 2021-2022 school year. I know that some of you are having some issues logging on. It'll get better. But the link is actually on our calendar, and now it's a live link. So you just have to click and then register, and then you're in. So before I give the floor to Dr. Iverson and her team, who will be presenting district data tonight, I just wanted to run quickly through a few points. So what is the Education and Wellness Committee? It's a board committee, so technically this committee does not have community membership, even though the way that I have run it over the past 2 years is that I have always allowed community straight into the Zoom meeting so that they can give input and ask questions directly. So the agenda for tonight is that first we're going to elect a chairperson. I wanted to briefly touch on the issue of communication. I did a survey of topics of interest, which we will be addressing throughout the school year because there are a lot of them. And then we will go on to the data presentation. So we have 3 board members, Jamal Thomas, Kiana Washington, and myself on this committee. I have chaired the committee for the past 2 years. I would have liked to hand this off to Kiana Washington, who is our board member with perhaps the most experience in education per se. Kiana, are you still declining, or would you like to chair this committee? Or I'm not asking Jamal, not because I don't think he's a worthy chairperson, but he's taken on the CEC committee. So I think he's going to have his hands full for this year as a new board member and chairperson of that committee. So Kiana, do you want it, or should I just nominate myself, or how do you guys want to do this?
So I actually, due to my new position and being a new board member, I move that Tanya Dragitt continue to be the committee chairperson for the next year.
Jamal, are you okay with that?
I am.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. So I appreciate that. And I have to say, I do really enjoy chairing this committee. So I will do that for just 1 more year. So, okay. So the next thing is that I wanted to touch briefly on the issue of communication, because I am also on the CEC committee, and we also had a discussion about this at our board meeting yesterday. And I think that we kind of need a cultural shift in our district when it comes to communication. So whoever's listening and whoever is going to watch this later on YouTube, I just wanted to remind you that really, when you have questions and concerns, and you could even call some of them complaints, and that the complaints are valid too, regarding your child or schedules or meetings, instruction, connectivity, quarantine procedures, whatever, really you should be reaching out to our website, your teachers, your guidance counselors, your social workers and psychologists, your building leaders, and your PTA. And in fact, the board recently received plans, sort of future aspirations from our building leaders. And they all said that they would work with the PTAs. And I think this is really the partnership that needs to be established, right, between the PTAs and the schools to answer all that kind of nitty gritty that goes on with your children and your schools. And I would say to Dr. Iverson, as our new superintendent, that this is really something that we need to strengthen, because I think that parents have not always received satisfactory answers or timely answers, and that this sort of has to become the new culture of our district, that really all of that sort of, how should I put it, that the hierarchy of communication works well, and that that really it's only when there is sort of when these mechanisms are consistently remiss in informing parents, that then they move on to up the chain of command to have these issues addressed, whether it's the board or the superintendent or central admin or whatever. And so with that in mind, I just want to remind everyone that really information about district level functioning and programs and sort of those overarching views that you want to get from about the district are the ones that come from committee meetings and from board meetings. Okay, so moving right along,
Trustee Chudley?
Yes.
So I just wanted to also piggyback on what you just said. I think the parents, community members, we need to give the administration at least 24 hours to get back. And even if you CC the secretary, that sometimes brings that email to their, to the forefront, because a lot goes on in a day. So we don't want parents to feel like they're not being answered. And I know Dr. Iverson, she might have a plan with her administrators, but at least give them some time to see the complaint. And then, like I said, CC maybe someone to help them with everything else that they're dealing with daily before you go right to Dr. Iverson.
That is a great point, and I think we all need to sort of be patient and follow a certain protocol, because at the end of the day, I think it will make everyone more accountable and actually work better for everyone, work better for the parents in terms of getting their questions and concerns answered.
Okay.
So with that in mind, I sent out a survey. I had, I think, 21 responders, and I want to thank all of those who responded. And I try to put in sort of major topics. And I'm just going to run through the topics, Dr. Iverson. I can email this to you.
Okay.
But clearly, I can tell you that the three topics that garnered the most interest were IB and AP updates and how we're going to move forward with these programs. And I think you and I have talked about this in our one-on-one meeting, and the board has also had expressed their concerns about this to you, that we are a small district. We have two very rigorous programs going on here. And so people would like to hear about how that will what will happen. And just for all of you who are listening, Dr. Iverson did say that she's waiting for Dr. Macaluso to arrive, and that he will be doing a complete assessment of these programs. So the answer is not going to be forthcoming next week or even the week later. I think Dr. Iverson is really taking a very sort of deliberate, data-driven approach to sort of assessing this and figuring out what we will do with these. The other area of interest was making data available to the community. And we have been talking about this since last year, and it seems that there is quite a bit of interest in having really our data posted, or some version, some summary of our data posted on our website, so that parents can easily access it. And the New York State Education Department does have a lag to it, and it doesn't have all of our data. And I think parents are very interested in seeing really how we are doing as a whole, and not just receiving data about their own children. The third topic was special education. And for those of you who were not at yesterday's board meeting, I just want to tell you that Jill Post did a very informative summary of our special education programs. So you might want to look at watch the board meeting from last night to sort of get really kind of a comprehensive view before in this committee, we may dig into some of the details of this. And then the other issues that I raised were adding a vocational track in our district, which over the years, I have heard people express an interest in. Civic education. I think that with everything going on in our country, I have to say that this was my personal sort of addition to this survey. I thought that I know that other schools actually do civic education, and some actually have it as a requirement. And I thought that maybe we could do something similar. People wanted to hear about departmentalization before grade 6, proficiency assessments, which we're going to hear about tonight, implementing neighborhood schools, which I know is a hot topic and has to do with the mansion, test prep and college essay prep, and how well those services are serving us. So I think those are all the education topics that I went through. I also did a separate question about wellness or socio-emotional learning, and really people were interested about hearing in school avoidance. We talked about this last night, actually, during Jill Post's presentation. People were interested in hearing about various incidents at the high school and how they're being handled. The budget for socio-emotional learning and how it's being used, which I will get to in my last slide. And then which wellness programs do we actually offer per building? So to the person who has been asking me about the budget for SEL, I just wanted to say that this was a response that I received. I think it was during the summer. This is the actual budget, but I just want to say that it's actually very difficult to put an actual number on this budget because it overlaps with so many other aspects of what our psychologists and social workers and teachers are doing, that it's really hard to actually put a number on that. And so this was the best that I could come up with. And it's my understanding, Dr. Iverson, that we are going to be attributing about $300,000 from our ARP. Am I getting the acronym right? ARP. Yep. To actually catching up on learning, including SEL. So I'm going to go back to my last slide, just because there are a number of you who really took the time to be very thoughtful and sort of give me additional topics of interest. So I kind of tried to condense them in this slide and summarize them. And I am not ignoring you. It's just that we have limited time. And when Dr. Macaluso arrives, we will be addressing these throughout the year. So this is just sort of a thumbs up to those who really took the time to share their concerns with me. So with that said, Dr. Iverson, you have the floor and your team has the floor, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen.
Thank you.
Okay.
And later we'll put the screen up for us. And I want to again thank you, Trustee Dragic, for asking us to join this committee. I am honored to be able to serve as the liaison to this committee this year. I will say, though, as when Dr. Macaluso arrives, he will take on a lot of this work as well, and many times may be in my stead at some of these committee meetings, since this is around what we do best, how we educate our youngsters in the district. So again, thank you and welcome. So I'm joined tonight by Carlos Ramirez. Carlos is our CIO and Director of Technology in the district. Many of you know him. And he's the person who manages the dashboard where all the data goes. That's the accountability system that we have in place where data goes, and we can then export data from that system in any kind of permutations we want, creating reports to give us how proficiency levels, proficiency levels holistically as a grade, by gender, by strand. So it's that delving deep, sort of drilling down we can do with that system to help us begin to analyze data to inform our instruction. We're joined by Lori DeAndrea. She is our literacy specialist in the district. She also runs, as you know, the Teacher Center, and she handles our Teacher Mentor program, which is very important to the work of creating, helping teachers brand new to become highly effective in their job. They come to us right out of college. They have all the theory and the training. They come to us, and what school systems do is then help them mold that into the delivery of highly effective instruction. So Lori does a lot of that, and we do a lot of that through our team structure and collaboration and communication that we hold weekly. So I'm going to start. I'm going to introduce. I met with the team and wanted to kind of set the stage for tonight. We will not be showing actual data because we're right now collecting baseline data. We will be coming back to this committee as soon as this data is collected, and we are finished doing that assessment and analyzing it. We will come and give you what that data looks like. But I said to Trustee Dragic, I think tonight we just wanted to kind of give an overview of what we do, why we do it, and how we use it. So if you could go to the next slide. So I put this in because I know that when we monitor data, it's all different types of data. It is not always student achievement data. So data comes from teacher developed assessments. So a lot of our teachers as well, they make assessments, chapter tests, quizzes. All of those are forms of data. So when we talk data, I always begin when I'm leading professional development and I'm talking to the principals or leaders, we know that the data bucket we look at has many different types. Grades, basically at the secondary level, are data points that we look at when we're in grade level meetings, looking to see how our students are doing. Attendance is a data point, we know that. Suspensions, benchmarks such as STAR and iReady, summative assessments such as the Regents and state assessments, and of course our diagnostic tests. We have all of these in Greenburgh. We have a test that we use, or assessment we use in each of these buckets. So data to monitor to determine how we're doing as a district and how we're doing as a school, how we're doing as a teacher, and how we're doing as students come from all of these buckets. So it's not always how did we do at the end of the year. It's looking at that data that along the year that helps us get to the end of the year. So that student achievement summative assessment data is proficient and above. So just wanted to throw that in to let you know that when we get to the end of the road in June, we've done a lot of this stuff along the way. So that it's just not looking at the end of the year. The next one, please. So I spent a lot of time with principals talking about when we're looking at data, and this is probably the topic we're going to be talking about on my next superintendent conference day. So when I say principals, I'm talking in my experience. Data is not just achievement. A big data point that results in student achievement is that cause data. And so having us begin to talk and think about to get to student achievement data, the results of the measurements that we are administering, what are those conditions that must be in place for that to happen? And my focus this year, as I've shared at all my parent voice sessions, is focusing on the conditions of the system, the adults, the actions of the adults. So a lot of what we do is what results in student achievement. So the cause effect data, those assessments I just shared with you on the last, all of that is effect data. Those are the results, the grades, the summative, that's the end result. But to get to that is what we do. And that's the information based on our actions in the system. Very important to the work. Next data. And I shared this, and these are cause data points. You've seen this before, many on this call. These are abstract in nature, they're conditions. This is the type of cause data we are working on. And as I shared at the parent session, as part of my vision and approach to improve our capacity to do the job we're charged with, so that what we do in all of these areas results in effect data that moves students along. It doesn't happen without these things in place. So this is why this is the vision and focus of how I'm approaching the work, strengthening these components so that it translates into higher student achievement. Clearly, highly effective principals and highly effective teachers will lead to highly effective instruction. And when that is in place, students do better. So I always say the achievement happens if the certain conditions are in place. So that's the causal part of the data that we watch and we track and we monitor that data as much as we do the effect data. So that's my introduction. We're now going to get into our local assessments that we administer here. Oh, I'm sorry, I did add this. So this is a process for how we look and analyze data, depending on, doesn't matter what type it is. We just don't look at sheets and it comes in us in all kinds of forms. But mentally, when our teachers, and I'm going to be sharing this with our principals on November 2nd, I'm going to be sharing this model because I know that process of how we analyze data, we need to think it through. So we start by looking at the data. That's step one. Just what is the data? We chart it. Sometimes it comes out in nice charts, but we chart it, extrapolate, put the data down. What were the results? Number one, just look at the data, examine it. Second, we need to start analyzing. That's the deep part of it where we drill down. So we may see the level of proficiency, but now we want to know why that data is that data. Why was that data good, low? We go inside, look at the strands. We look at how many mastered that strand. We may look at certain questions and look to see if there were certain numbers that every child missed. That tells us that maybe there was some vocabulary there all the kids did not recognize. That's a teaching point. That's the level of analysis that we're going to be working on this year. It's a condition to making sure we are directing our instruction to meet the needs of kids. And then from that, we think about, so what do we want to accomplish in our heads? And teachers do this automatically. So they know where the kids are, they know where they want to take them. That's the SMART goal. What do we want to achieve and how much time do we need to do it? How are we going to do it? Step 4, what is the strategy we're going to use? And this is grade level teachers sitting around saying, well, what did you do? Well, I taught it this way because we don't make our teachers teach a certain way. They do. They are individuals. They're creative. Everyone has their own style as long as they're teaching standards and the content. They all different. But I may teach a strategy a different way than you. But if my results are higher than yours, I may want to ask you what you did. That's the discussion we want our teachers to have. And then what we want our teachers to do in step 5 is to measure their work. So at the end of this assessment, at the end of this instruction, did what we do work? That's called a result indicator. Result indicator meaning, what we do indicate the results we were looking at? And then again, we monitor, and that process goes on and on. That's why it's called a continuous cycle of improvement. It's circular, and we do this mentally all the time. It's in minutes. Teachers are doing this process when they're analyzing any bucket of that data that I shared. So I wanted to preface with the committee the work around data. It's not just the numbers. That's the key and most important, but the work to get there and to analyze it and to determine what we need to do is a process that we're using. And that's part of my work this year to help and to strengthen our teachers and administrators in using this so that we can really find out where we are as in Greenburgh and what do we need to focus on? Because what I'm looking for as a superintendent is what is the high yield strategy? What is the high yield focus? What do we need to work on as a district? And then flesh that down into how it looks at the school levels, into the classroom, down to the student. And it starts by looking at that data. So the baseline, when we get it, we'll go through this, and then with the next meeting, you'll hear those results. So now Lori DeAndre is going to get into what our local assessments are, and then Carlos is going to talk a little bit about our state assessments, the summative data that we collect. Thank you.
Dr. Iverson, before Lori goes, I just wanted to ask if anyone has any questions for Dr. Iverson before Lori.
So I actually
can't
have
see.
a question.
Sure.
Okay.
So Dr. Iverson, as you were explaining the continuous cycle of improvement, this is the work that's happening in our professional learning communities, right from pre-K all the way up to 12. So our teachers are engaged in professional learning communities, and that's when they have their data chats and when they look at data and they can talk to each other about best practices. So I just wanted to go ahead.
I'm sorry, you go right ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So I'm looking at that now. I know we have PLCs and PLC leaders. This is the level it should be happening. So I think, I know they are having these data discussions. We're just going to hone our skills, build our capacity around this so that we are doing this at the level that that it should be done. So, but yes, I will say to you, Trustee Washington, absolutely, they are in data discussions. They are in data meetings. They are looking at data. They are creating action plans around what the data is informing, and they're talking strategies, and they're talking at grade levels around what they're going to go back and do. They're setting more small goals around how long are we going to do this before we measure again. And then they're coming back to that same meeting to say, how did we do? So yeah, that is happening. But they don't even probably know that's the cycle they're following, those 5 steps I shared, 6 steps I shared with you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Laser, you can move to the next slide, and I think Dr. Iverson was also going to speak to this slide.
Yeah, so what I had Ms. DeAndrea do is I said, so you know, when I first got here, what are our assessments? So, and how about putting it in some type of a cycle so we can see the overlap and just how they're flowing. When you look at administration 1, administration 2, administration 3, start thinking of administration 1 as being beginning of the year, administration 2, MOY, middle of the year, meaning where we have between 1 and 2, a lot of, that's where the teaching's happening. So mid-year, we don't want to wait to the end of the year, MOY and then EOY. EOY is how did we do what we said, and with the fidelity and intent that we planned. If you notice if you look at this chart, a lot would say, wow, a lot of assessments, but that grade column lets you see which grades take which assessments. So all students do not take all these assessments. They're developmentally appropriate for grade level. Some do different things. You know, our phonemic awareness piece for our lower level kindergarten pre-K students is that fundamental foundation hearing piece of beginning to learn letters. So that's something that's done at that level, and Ms. DeAndrea will talk about it. And then we get into the higher level assessments as they matriculate from kindergarten on up until 9th grade, 12th grade, and end of the year. So I wanted to show you how they're flowing this year. We're right now, as you can see, in administration 1. And we'll be done with those assessments. The dates are there. That's why we will have the data for the next meeting. Thank you, Mr. I'm done, Ms. DeAndrea.
Okay. Laser, next slide.
Lori, I actually had a question about the previous slide. And it's just really a general question about I know that Dr. Iverson pointed out rightly that, you know, it looks like a lot, but not everyone takes all of these assessments. I'm just wondering if you feel that we're doing too many assessments that might take away from instruction, or not enough, or if we have the right assessments, or like, what is I just wanted to get your kind of feeling for what we're doing now and how that could improve, both in terms of the amount and also the type of assessments that we're doing.
Okay, I do feel that we have the right assessments and the right information that we need to support all learners. As I present about each of those assessments, I'll talk a little bit more about that. Some of these assessments we've been doing for a while, but the Hegarty assessment is something that we added last year because we noticed that there was a need for a phonemic awareness screener. So I do meet daily, weekly with teachers, all teachers, and we talk about these things. I meet with reading teachers and we discuss, you know, what's missing, what do we need to add, what types of information do we need to support our learners and their needs. So these are ongoing conversations that happen daily. And that was one of the reasons why we brought in the Hegarty screener last year, because that was something that was lacking. But at this point, I do feel like we have what we need. I don't feel like we need any additional assessments, but as I go through the PowerPoint, I will explain why.
So Ms. DeAndrea, before you go to the next slide, are you using data to determine the assessments that we need for our students? So the assessments that are here are meeting the needs of our students, and we're letting the data drive these decisions.
I believe so.
Okay. No, because we just used the word feel. So I just wanted to make sure that the community knows it's not feelings, it's data that's driving the decisions of the district to meet the needs of our students.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, Laser. Okay, so the slides are broken up into what the assessment is, why we use it, and how we use it. So I'll go through this. I will give examples of questions on the assessment, and then I'll pause. And if anyone has any questions after each one, we can talk about that. So the dial 4 is the developmental indicators for the assessment of learning. I added a hyperlink to each of these because I feel that this presentation could be something that's posted on the district website. We're not going to click on those links, but when parents do, or any of you click on those links, it'll bring you to a page. Some of them I created, and some of them bring you to a parent page on the website. That'll basically give you even more information about that assessment. So I just wanted to let you know that ahead of time. But I do think that this will be posted on the website. Am I correct
Excellent.
in saying that, Dr. Iverson?
Yes.
Okay. So, and we can add anything additional that you think should be here. So keep that in mind as we go through. So the dial 4 is a developmental screening tool, which is designed to measure the most fundamental or basic concepts that are acquired by young children. Okay, and I'm going to explain that in the next part. So it's administered one-to-one to all of our ECP students 2 times a year. So in the fall, beginning of the year, and at the end of the year. It is also administered to our kindergartners when they register in the spring, if they did not attend ECP. So students that are starting in September receive this screening in the spring from kindergarten teachers, so that we have data on all of our students. There's 5 major areas that this assessment measures, and they are motor, concepts, language, self-help, and social development. So let me tell you a little bit about those. So on the assessment, the motor section asks students to catch a ball, to jump, to hop on one foot, to skip, to build a tower with blocks. They are assessed on fine motor, those are gross motor skills, and then they're also assessed on fine motor skills like cutting on a line, copying a shape, and that's the motor section. Concepts is the next section, and that's where students are asked to identify body parts, colors, name colors, count forwards and backwards. They're asked about positions, show me behind, show me in front of, show me on top of, concepts, big and little, and shapes. In the language section, the students are asked personal data. What is your name? Where do you live? Objects and actions. They have to point to certain objects. They're given pictures, and they're asked to point to those objects. Point to somebody who's running, point to the glass that is full. Letters and sounds they're asked about, point to the letter P, point to the letter that makes the sound and they're also asked rhyming questions and questions about problem solving. The self-help and social development sections are done through teacher observations. They are done through observing students zipping up a coat, pouring into a glass, and it's also done through parent surveys. So that's how that information is gathered. So why do we give this screener? So this screener is used to identify where students are and any delays the child may have. Some of this information is used for placement purposes. The data on each student, especially at ECP, is analyzed by the teachers in the fall so that they can plan for meaningful individualized instruction. The ECP teachers progress monitor throughout the year and do share those progress monitoring reports with families and at parent-teacher conferences so that they can continue to monitor the progress of the areas that the student might have been struggling with on the dial in the fall. Are there any
Question for you.
Yes.
So, this is really fascinating, but I'm just wondering if these are very young children, right? And I imagine that if you were to do a scatter plot, right, of their abilities at this age, it would be all over the place. It would be really almost too hard, and maybe Carlos can speak to this, that, to do a statistical analysis of this kind of children at this age with these skills, it would be very hard. So I'm just wondering how, I'm not going to use the right word here. I don't want to say how seriously you take this data, but really, when you have kids that vary wildly in their skills, like what does that really mean for their future? Like, how do you even take that into account moving forward? I mean, it seems to me like it's really not until grade 3 that you kind of have this sort of tightening of all those various curves. So again, I'm just wondering really how informative is all of this?
Well, all data is going to have, different variables that affect the data. If the child was tired, we're engaging right now. I'm administering the iReady assessment to all the kindergartners. Some of them are having trouble manipulating the mouse pad. I mean, that's going to affect the data. There's definitely all things that, can affect data. Last year when we were giving the assessments hybrid, there were parents in the home and, were they helping them with the assessment? So there's always going to be that. So this is just one data point. That's why the teachers continue to progress monitor throughout the year. This is a baseline. It's given in the fall. Another thing that affects data is, how comfortable the child feels with the teacher, which is why we don't assess kids on day one when they get here, because they need time to be comfortable with the teacher. There can be so many variables.
So, Trustee Dragic, point of clarity, were you just wondering how much information we receive from this type of assessment because of the young children, because they're young, and how does that really affect them in the next proficiency levels for the next grade? Is that what you were saying?
Yes, I think really what I was saying is that, so, I had 3 kids of my own, and I think one thing you learn when you have kids, especially 3 of them, is that they have very, very erratic and different trajectories, especially at that early age. So it's almost like there's almost like a question, which is, I mean, obviously, if you have, outliers, you can detect them. But I think that the average is quite wide. And so on some level, I'm almost wondering why we're testing children in ECP. I guess that's really the fundamental. Yeah.
Okay, I think that was the question she was asking.
Yeah. Like, is
Okay.
it worth really testing kids at this very early age when they're like all over the place?
I think it is. I mean, I do think that there are a lot of children that do show what they know through this assessment. And then, for the ones that, the data is all over the place, as you said, then the teacher can then do teacher observations to get, cleaner data on those children. I mean, it basically all data drives instruction, and that's the purpose of it.
And I would add, I mean, that's a very good question, but, thinking of what you're asking, Trustee Dragic, I guess, why is important to do it? Because if we think on research on human growth and development that all educators and probably have to take as part of our degree program that teaches us that human development trajectory of the child and the mind and how it grows. And in that research, that's why age 5 basically is the age that they say that a child should be able to enter kindergarten, because based on that age, and they have acquired a certain level of development, a certain level of skill, and some of these skills. And so we know that's the research, or that's what we use to know where we have a basis for what a child should be able to do by a certain age. We're not saying they have to, we're not saying all do, but it helps us with that kind of knowledge. And then doing an assessment like this and seeing, we know where the child should be by that age. This helps us see who is at that age, who is working or have developed these skills, and who has not. And then that helps teachers begin to have those conversations around differentiation and how to help those students who are not at that level that they should be. It pertains to just even learning to read. We know we want them all reading by grade 3, but all don't. And a lot of those variables and other things that may have happened can impact that. So I do think, Trustee Georgie, is important that we start with this. You'll be amazed if you watch a 4-year-old, you can just say skip and they just have no knowledge of it. So it tells us something, because that's something we were trying to assess. If they know what that motor skill, it helps us in terms of planning maybe OT or PT for that youngster. So it does help, because as they continue to move through the school system, it may identify now while we may see some concerns later. It's just all used for that child's plan of instruction, really. I don't know if that answers your question. Did that help?
It does. Yes, it does. I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit, just because, we're all so different on some level
Yeah.
that, yeah.
The assessment is done in a very playful way. So students almost feel as though they're playing. It's not an assessment like, there's a piece of paper in front of them and we're saying, write your name, it's like, okay, we're going to catch a ball now. Let's all hop on one foot, so it's done in a very playful way, which does engage the children. But there are some students who are very shy or, are not going to show what they really know.
Right.
Okay. Laser.
I wanted to interject for a minute. Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi. So I just wanted to share also that from the perspective of what happens in that early grade is mostly awareness. So, is the students getting aware of their environment for learning? And remember, at that time, the students are basically exposed to devices that are touch screen. They don't even have keyboards. They are trying to discover what is available in terms of the tools, in terms of the environment where they are is conducive to the learning and the instruction. So all these 4 skills, these major areas that Ms. Andrea and the superintendent also mentioned, these are basically the first step into that route. And it allows the educators to identify where they need to kind of look for intervention, more work and progression and attention. So it's basically mostly awareness on, getting to know the students, getting to know how we can actually better service them. And I just wanted to say that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
Trustee Thomas, were you going to say something? I'm sorry. I just didn't want to move on.
No, I just was trying to make it aware that that Mr. Ramirez.
Oh, okay. Okay, so the next assessment is the Heggerty Phonemic Awareness Screener. And what this screener is it's used to measure phonemic awareness skills, which are the sounds in language. So this is an oral, and an auditory assessment. Children are not seeing any letters in front of them. This is all done orally and auditorily. It is administered, and this assessment we started administering this assessment. I'm so confused with COVID last year, the beginning of last year. Yes. No, maybe the beginning. No, 2 years ago. So it's administered 1-to-1 to kindergarten students in the fall to identify students who require additional support in this area. This assessment measures rhyming, beginning and ending sounds, blending and segmenting syllables, and adding and deleting syllables. So I'm just going to give you some examples of each of those. So on the rhyming section, the students are asked to recognize rhymes. So the teacher will say something like, I will say 2 words, say the words aloud, and tell me if the words rhyme. Then they have to produce rhymes. I will say a word. Can you say the word back to me? and tell me a word that rhymes. Okay, on beginning and ending sounds. For the beginning and ending sounds, I will say a word, you'll repeat it. What is the first sound you hear in the word? And then same thing for ending sounds. What is the last sound you hear in the word? And before you get to the questioning part, you do give the student examples so that they can understand what you're asking. For syllables, I will say the two words or syllables. Can you blend them into a whole word? Foot, ball. For adding syllables and deleting syllables, this section, I will say a word. I will add a word at the end to make a new word. Listen, cup. When I add cake at the end, the word is cupcake. Now it's your turn. Say tooth, add brush at the end, and the word is, and they say toothbrush. So these are the types of things that we ask on the phonemic awareness test. It's all oral, nothing is in front of them. It's oral and auditory only. So why do we give this assessment? So students who are phonemically aware are able to hear the sounds in words. They're able to isolate the sounds, blend them together, take them apart, manipulate sounds in the word. Again, for example, segmenting the word pen into the sounds. P, n is an example of a phonemic awareness task. When a student is proficient in phonemic awareness, they are able to transfer this oral and auditory skill to print, which then becomes the phonics instruction. And they were able to read and spell words. So phonemic awareness is a necessary foundation for reading. And it is a predictor of students that will either be able to read or have trouble to read. So this is a really important screener for us so that we can catch any students that are struggling at the beginning of kindergarten. So that the reading teachers can then provide additional support to these students to build their phonemic awareness skills. So how do we use this data? So data, the assessment is given to every student. In year one, I gave the assessment myself to every single kindergarten student. We then analyzed all of the data. We met with teachers. We discussed the data. We shared with them who was still struggling with these skills so that they could work on them in the classroom. And then we made groups of students that we pulled out and serviced based on the areas that they were deficient in. So data on each student is analyzed to identify the students who require, and that's called tier 2 support, is the support that's given in small groups by the reading specialist. Questions?
Lori, how many of these reading specialists do we have?
There is a reading specialist for each grade.
For each grade. Okay, thank you.
So when you say each grade, is that K through 12?
K through 6.
So there's one reading specialist per grade, K through 6.
And that's pretty much how they're assigned. So there's a kindergarten reading specialist, there's a first grade, there's a second grade, there's a third grade, and they're assigned to that specific grade. They work together with those teachers. They meet during the PLCs with them. And then in 4, 5, 6, they work in 1 or 2 grades, depending on the needs.
So how many children do they actually need to work with per grade? How many kids do we have that need to work with a specialist?
It's different in each grade. It's approximately, I mean, it doesn't exceed 30 students. Every year is a little bit different. Sometimes it's 22, sometimes it's 25, but it doesn't exceed 30.
And how many Wilson certified reading specialists do we have?
Wilson certified, the first grade reading teacher is Wilson certified, so is the second, so is the third. And then there's 2 at Bailey that are certified out of the 3 reading specialists.
And do we have any at the middle school?
Yep, There are also 3 teachers who are Wilson certified at the middle school. And then we also have special educators that are certified as well. And I am.
Have a lot of support. So that means all of our students by 3rd grade should be reading. All right.
Okay.
It's like Kelly Ross has a question.
Yeah, any of the reading teachers are in Gillingham certified?
I am Orton Gillingham certified. I believe that there is only one other.
Okay.
Okay, are we good?
I'm sorry, I have one last question. So basically, given that you have 1 per grade and somewhere, let's say on average 25 kids, so how much time per week does this reading specialist spend per child?
So most of the K-6 buildings operate on a 6-day cycle. In grades 4, 5, and 6, they see the students 3 days out of the 6-day cycle. The kindergarten and the 1st grade teachers use a 30-minute block because they try to see the students every day. Depending on the number of students they have to service each year dictates how many times a week. But last year it was every day in K and 1.
Got it. Thank you.
And in the middle school, it's every other day. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so Fundations unit assessments are given at the end of each unit. Let me tell you what Fundations is. So Fundations is a Wilson program. It is a multi-sensory phonics, spelling, and handwriting program. It also includes supplementary activity sets for pre-K students. So we are using it in ECP as well. Fundations is designed as a whole class general education program. So that would be tier 1. Whole class gen ed is tier 1. So instruction is delivered daily, every single day in pre-K through 3 for 30 minutes. The teachers follow the program. It's a scripted program. There's a lesson for each day. They do select different words based on the students' needs in their class. And that's the only piece of the program that's differentiated. The rest of the program is a scripted phonics program. So after each unit, and the units vary per grade level, you know, in kindergarten, there's 4 units. In 1st grade, there's 14 units. In 2nd grade, there's 17 units. The unit tests measures the phonics skills that were taught. The test is broken up into sounds, words, trick words, and sentence writing. So let me just give you some examples of that. So for example, on the sound sections, the student is given 5 sounds and they have to write down the sound that they hear. The teacher will say, what says ah? The students repeat the sound ah, and they write ah on the line. The next one might be what says ch? And the students write, respond ch, and then they write ch on the line. For the word section, the students are dictated a word, such as write the word chop. The students repeat the word chop. They tap the word chop, ch, ah, p, and then they write the word on the line. So they're given 5 words, real words. The students are also given trick words. Okay, these are words that don't follow a phonics rule and they aren't spelled the way they sound. For example, said, from, and should. These are words that just have to be memorized by the student, cannot tap them out. They don't sound the way you spell them. So those are dictated as well. And each grade has a whole list of trick words that these are shared with the parents at the beginning of the year. And each unit has about 5 words the students learn to read and spell. Then there is a sentence dictation. A sentence is dictated to the students, and the students repeat the sentence and then must write the sentence with correct spelling, capitalization, and punctuation. So for every grade, K through 3, this is the assessment based on the skills that were taught in that unit and previous units. So why do we have the Fundations program? Fundations lays the groundwork for lifelong literacy. Students in grades K to 3 receive this systematic program in critical foundational skills, emphasizing phonics, which I just talked about, high frequency words, which are trick words, reading fluency, vocabulary. The program does have a little piece of comprehension strategies built in, but it's very minimal. Handwriting is taught and spelling. So how do we use this data? So this data is very important. Data on each student, on every student is analyzed after each unit test. It's analyzed with the reading teacher, myself, and the classroom teacher. We make sure that after each unit assessment, 80% of the students in the class need to have passed the assessment for us to move on to the next unit. If there are still students struggling, we do not move on. We reteach for a few days or a week, and then we reassess. We make sure that the students in the class receive what they need and have mastered it before we move on. We identify students who might require the tier 2 support, which is with a reading specialist, and we call that a double dose of Fundations. So basically they will receive another dose of the Fundations lesson with the reading specialist to help reinforce the concepts if they're still struggling. Any questions about that?
Yeah, so this is something that the teachers do directly. This is not done by the reading specialist. This is something that the teachers have become trained in, or how do the
Yes.
teachers really know?
So every teacher went to a Wilson training. We also we've been doing this program for 6 or 7 years now. Every teacher has gone to the Fundations training for their grade level. Okay, there's a training for each grade level. I am also a certified trainer for Fundations. There are a few others who are as well in the district, other reading teachers who have received that certification as well. So I do support new teachers or leave replacements that come into buildings with Fundations as well. What was the other part of your question? I'm sorry.
That was it, just whether it's really the actual
Yes.
teachers rather than out external. Okay, that was
It is
it.
the actual teachers. We also, for our first 3 years of implementation, we had a trainer come into the buildings and do embedded coaching with each teacher, so that we were making sure that everyone was following the program with fidelity, because that really is the key to the success of this program, to follow each day and each lesson and not skip anything and do it the way it's scripted. It's very important to have this continuity of instruction from one grade to the next, because each unit builds on the next.
So Dr. Iverson, for our next meeting, when you're going to show us data from the beginning of the year assessment, it would be nice to know, since the district has been doing this program for 6 to 7 years, are we showing any growth in the area of reading? So that's something good, because that data could drive, is this assessment a necessity for Greenburgh? But that's something we could talk about for the next meeting.
Sure.
So
I think that's a really terrific point. Yeah. For all the assessments, actually. And this is something that Carlos should be able to do with Alpine, is show us sort of timelines of these assessments and whether they are making a difference, right? Right, Carlos?
working actually and developing those reports for our next meetings. So we have like a
Okay.
sequence on local assessments, a sequence on state assessments. As you know, local assessments are the only ones that we really have in place even during the pandemic, because it was the
Yes, I
most
know that,
recent baseline. We have very little in terms of state assessments, but we get to that in a minute. Thanks.
Okay.
So if I could just respond to that quickly, we have seen a decrease in the number of students that need phonics instruction after third grade. In year 3 of the implementation of Fundations, we assess all of the third graders at the end of the year to see if there are any students who still need support with phonics instruction in 4th grade. When we first started, we had a large number of students going from 3rd to 4th grade that needed just words. So how the program works is Fundations is the program that's used for all students in pre-K through 3. When students still require additional support beyond that point, there is a program called Just Words that the Bailey teachers are certified, the Bailey reading teachers are certified in. And that program supports students who still need additional support with phonics. It follows the same phonics rules, but it's done in a smaller group. And then if students are still struggling, even after receiving Just Words is a 1-year program. After receiving Just Words, they will receive Wilson reading system in an even smaller group based on the level that they need. Wilson is done in steps. They're called steps. So step 1 is 1.1. Some students are successful at that step and may need to be in step 2.1. We do an assessment. The reading teachers will assess those students and put them in the correct groupings. And usually those groups are 2 to 3, maybe even 4 students. But we have seen pre-COVID, we had no students that were going from 3rd to 4th grade that needed Just Words.
Oh, that's a
So
good
may I
point.
just
During
ask a
COVID-
quick question?
Oh, who's that?
Pamela Davis.
Go ahead.
Oh, hi, Pam.
I just have a quick question. So Fundations connects to helping our students to read?
Yes, it's a decoding program to read the words.
So that they're comprehending, not just reading words, but comprehending.
Not comprehending it. It's a small piece of the literacy block. It is the word study piece. It's studying
Okay.
phonics.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
So Ms. DeAndrea, were the teachers able to continue Fundations during the pandemic when we were all at home?
So as you can imagine, it was challenging, but we did do it. The Wilson program did offer a lot of the resources online, so the teachers were able to support the students. We also ordered home packs, which were basically the materials that the students use in school. Like there's a magnetic journal, it's a magnet board that has all of the alphabet, and the students use that in school to manipulate the words for spelling and reading. So we were able to purchase home packs, which were paper copies of this same magnetic journal, but they were disposable. So we did do our best. We did do Fundations every single day. It was a little bit more challenging doing it through the computer. So what we did notice was at the end of last year, we did assess all the 3rd graders again, and we do have 2 groups of Just Words going into 4th grade because there were some gaps in instruction, and I attribute that to COVID, and trying to do phonics instruction through a computer is difficult.
Right.
Okay. Laser. Okay, so Fontes and Pinnell Bass, which is the benchmark assessment system. So what this assessment does is it evaluates each student's reading and comprehension ability and determines their instructional level for guided reading. So it is administered 1-to-1 to all kindergarten through 6th grade students 3 times a year. In the fall, the beginning of the year, in the winter, the middle of the year, and in the spring, the end of the year. So why do we administer this assessment? The Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessment system provides teachers with a tool and the texts at each level to observe specific reading behaviors that students are showing, and then interpret and use that data to plan for meaningful instruction. So let me explain to you how this assessment works. So when giving the best, the students are given a text that they read aloud or a section of a text, while a teacher listens and records their decoding errors, any self-corrections that they make, and notes their reading fluency. After the student reads aloud, the teacher asks some comprehension questions. It's called a comprehension conversation, and it's between the student and the teacher. The teacher takes notes on how the student is making meaning of the text. The questions are organized into 3 categories: within, beyond, and about. And I'll give you some examples of questions that are asked in each category. So within is, on every level, the student is asked to just summarize the text. It is a literal understanding of what they read. It is just a summary, important parts of the text, beginning, middle, and end, in a sequential order. In the beyond section, students are asked to predict, make connections between the text and their own life, or the text and the world. They're asked to infer. Okay, so some examples of questions that would be in the beyond section would be, was this a good ending? Why or why not? Look at the illustration on page 10. How do you think the skunk feels? How can you tell? What might happen if? What is the genre and how do you know? What lessons can you learn? In the about section, the questions that are asked are all around the writer's craft or the author's craft. So examples in that section would be, what did you notice about the writer's language? What did the writer do to make the story funny? Did the author choose a good title for this book and why? So our teachers are then able to identify through this comprehension conversation students' strengths and weaknesses, and they can plan for responsive teaching. Responsive teaching is responding to the needs of each student in order to move them forward. Responsive teaching is similar to differentiated instruction. They go hand in hand. Good instruction comes from careful observation and assessment of students. Research shows that teachers are the single most important factor in a child's learning achievement. No lesson plan or program will single-handedly identify and impact a child's achievement and progress. The teacher teaches the child, not the book. So these conversations that these teachers are having, it does take time. It's done one-to-one, but it is so important to identify the strengths and the weaknesses for that student so that we can then instruct them the way they need to be instructed to move forward. So how do we use this data? We do lots of different things with this data. So teachers use this data to plan meaningful small group instruction. This is when students are engaged in guided reading. That is when they meet with the teacher in small groups of up to 6 students around a text that is at their instructional level, so they are able to read it and engage in conversations with some support from the teacher. After we test all of our students, we create data walls where in our PLCs, we talk about where students are at each grade level and how we can move them forward. Data meetings are conducted by the principal, myself, and the reading teacher with each classroom teacher to talk about the students and where they are and their needs and how we're going to move them forward. And then this helps us ensure that each student progresses and we identify interventions that are needed along the way. So we're constantly evaluating and reevaluating interventions so that we make sure that students are getting what they need. On the next slide, you'll see some pictures of the data walls that we
Lori, I have a very practical question about this as I'm trying to, I mean, I know that this is a really terrific program, but it's a very, as you've just described, a very time-consuming one. And I'm just wondering, how long does it take a teacher to assess one student? And then what are the other kids doing during that time? And then when the teacher breaks out into these groups by levels, what happens with the other kids who are in different levels? I'm just trying to wrap my mind around the practicality of this approach.
It's a really good question. So we give the teachers 4 to 6 weeks to assess all the students in their class. We ask them to assess 1 or 2 students a day so that it's not taking away from instruction. While the teacher is assessing a student, the other children are engaged in either independent reading or book clubs or writing activities. What was the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
The second part is when the teacher then has assessed all the kids and they're grouped by level, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember how many levels this thing has, but so if the teacher's working with 6 kids and there's how many, so if the teacher's working with 6 kids in a certain level, again, what are the other kids doing?
So it's part of our literacy block. So there's whole group instruction. They start out with whole group instruction, which is an independent read aloud or a shared reading. And then they move into small group work. And during the small group work, a teacher is taking a group of kids while the other students are working either on a TWR activity, independent reading, or in book clubs. Then they come back to the whole group and they talk about the strategy that they used in those, either in the guided reading group or whatever was taught, during a mini lesson, and they discuss how that helped them move forward as readers. So it's a whole model. Oh, and I think you also asked how long it takes to administer the assessment. It depends on the student and the grade level, between 30 and 40 minutes, but not more, it shouldn't be more than that.
I have a quick question with regard to students and their own kind of personal interests. Are there anywhere that as these processes are going on that we are kind of assessing for a specific student's interests so that we understand that as time goes along and can utilize that as a part of the way that we instruct for a particular student?
Yes, that is during independent reading. So each classroom has a classroom library and the students are encouraged to choose books based on their interest. The only context or part of the day that we use level text is during guided reading. Throughout the rest of the day, we're using grade level text and books that are of interest to the children. So we don't tell kids you're a level D and you can only pick books from the D section. We just encourage children to choose books that are based on their interest, and we teach them how to choose a just right book.
So I have a quick question. How is that working now with COVID and the pandemic?
So again, that was quite challenging. We did assess the students that were in school. We also asked parents who chose to keep their kids home if they would bring them in to be assessed, and many did. We assessed some kids outside. I was assessing as well. And if the parent was not willing to bring their child in, we did it virtually one-to-one. We did not use the BAS assessment because that was not available online, so we couldn't project the book. But we had guided reading texts that we could use, and we used those running records that went along with those guided reading texts to assess the kids one-to-one. So we did get an assessment from, I don't want to say every single kid. We tried our hardest to get every single, but it was definitely 90% to 95% were assessed.
Right. And 2 more questions, and I'm gonna let you go to your next slide. So even now in school, because with Fondations and Pinnell, students get to share books? Is that, and they get to be in groups? How does that look now while we're under the, these different constraints?
Dr. Iverson, did you want to answer that? I know that we're following the COVID rules. The dividers are up.
I'm just talking about even sharing materials, things like that, because this type of program is that type of program. So
Yeah. So they are, I think you're on mute.
Go ahead.
They are still using the guided reading books and wiping them down and putting hand sanitizer on every student before they touch the book. The borrowing from the library as well. They are allowed to borrow the book. They put it in a baggie and they keep that book in the baggie.
okay, because I know how the teacher has to administer. So thinking about the kidney desk, thinking about how many students,
Right.
thinking about social distancing, I
Right.
just don't know what modifications you're able to make for, the health and safety of all of the teachers and the students.
Yes, it's challenging. We have to make the groups a little bit smaller. If we're sitting around a kidney table, we have these conversations daily, weekly in PLC. We have some teachers don't have the kidney desk in their room anymore because the desks had to be spread apart in such a way that they had to take the tables out. Some rooms still have rugs. So I said, can a student sit on each corner of the rug? So it's a little bit different in each classroom, but we are having these conversations, and definitely at the forefront is keeping the students safe and separated the way we need to.
And then the last question, because Trustee George was just in talking about what are the other students doing while the teacher's testing. Are we still using the iReady online personal instruction? That's still, okay.
That
So
is,
you can explain that because they could be doing that also. Why?
They could be doing that also.
Right.
Each building does things a little bit different. In Jackson, they use Daily 5 while the students are in small group work. So the students, and again, this looks a little different in COVID because we can't move around the room the way we used to. So I know that Patricia Simone brought that Daily 5 in, and she's explained that in many of her board presentations. Her teachers have been doing it for many years. It's basically center work, and the kids shift through the centers while the teacher is working with their guided reading groups. But right now it's a little bit different because the kids have to stay at their desk, but they're still shifting into a center, but they're staying at their desk.
That's it. No more.
Okay, keep the questions coming. Okay, so here's iReady. So yes, iReady could also be a center, Trustee Washington. So you're absolutely right about that. So yes, but again, instruction is done a little bit differently in each building, the iReady instruction. So iReady reading and math diagnostic is what's being administered currently. I actually have been at Jackson and will be there all this week. We are administering it to the kindergarten students, Diego Rendon and I. And it's all hands on deck because these kids have never used a mouse pad before, and so it's getting them familiar with that. But trust me, they're having fun, they're laughing, they like it. It's definitely engaging. So what is the iReady diagnostic? So the iReady diagnostic is administered on the computer to all K-8 students 3 times a year. So again, it's done in the fall, the winter, and the spring. It measures reading skills in the following domains: phonemic awareness, phonics, high frequency words, vocabulary, comprehension of both literature and informational text. On the math portion of the iReady, that measures numbers and operations, algebra and algebraic thinking, measurement and data, and geometry. And those same domains are from kindergarten through 8th grade. So why do we give the iReady assessment? So iReady helps teachers determine each student's needs. It personalizes their learning. It monitors their progress throughout the school year. iReady consists of 2 parts: the diagnostic that we give 3 times a year, and the personalized instruction. Once the students take the diagnostic, the system then analyzes the data and provides lessons for the student in the domains that they need to work on. The lessons can also be adjusted by the teachers. If they feel that the lesson is too easy or too hard, they can add lessons the student might need. And the instructional piece is called personalized instruction. So the students who have laptops, on their class link, they will see the iReady icon. If first grade through 8th grade clicks on that right now, they will see their personalized instruction because they have completed taking the diagnostic. Kindergarten, we're still working on. So how do we use this data? So diagnostic data is shared with families. Most likely, we needed a little bit more time with makeups. So we're looking at the end of October, definitely by the end of October, that students will receive that data on their students. It'll be mailed by the school. Data is reviewed by teachers to determine the students' needs, to generate their personalized instruction and monitor their progress throughout the school year. So once all the data is collected, all of the administrators and I meet with the iReady representative, and she goes through all of our data and explains it, talks about how our students did, looks at cohort from one year to the next. The iReady representative also talks about, last year's 4th grade data compared to this year's 4th grade data. They give us a lot of information. We then, the principal and myself, meet with, and I'm doing reading. We meet with, for the reading portion of this, we meet with each grade level and we talk about the data. We talk about the trends. We talk about the cohort and look at the needs of the students and how they did on the assessment.
So Lori, who does the math part?
I guess I'll let somebody else answer that now. I know that Dr. Iverson, I think you're on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Trustee Drogic, that is a need. That is an area we need to, as I've already begun to, work with and talk to people in the district and assess. That is a hole. We don't have the same level of support for math as we do for the reading. We don't have a math literacy specialist in the district. So that's something you need to look at. And so no, Lori does what she can, but no one at this point is really looking at math that closely. So that's in true transparency a need for us to begin to do that with what we have and look to how we need to give more math support to our teachers around iReady.
So I have a question. I guess we could talk about another time also, but are there data teams? I know we have the PLC teams, but is there like an administrative data team that can also concentrate on reading and math? So that's something that might be able to help.
So I'm going to be introducing that whole concept around that cycle I shared early on this year. That's something Carlos and Lori hasn't even heard about yet. That concept around school level data teams, school improvement teams at the school level that looks at school-wide data to determine their needs in math and literacy. But the question still will become, when we look at the math data, who's there to support it? Because that's where the delivery model used for reading that Lori is going through, that whole the guided reading and the whole group instruction. I mean, there's a model like that similar to math. Math has a delivery model similar in terms of that whole group level to the 2nd tier, 3rd tier, and that requires support. Now, we do expect teachers and highly effective teachers are those tier 1, good teaching, good teach, first teach, they call it. The good first teach is the teacher. And teachers are trained to do that whole group as well as that small group, because before a child is given an intervention with additional support, they must get all of that due diligence from their highly effective first good teacher. So that's in place. So our teachers can do that. But for those youngsters who need a little more additional support in math, like they're getting in reading and math intervention, we don't have. That's just, we don't have not identified a math intervention program that can be used for students who need an additional level of support in math once we know that. So those are areas that we will be where we are. No one's doing, and that wasn't, I don't know what the vision around that was prior to this. It was just not in the district.
May I ask a
So,
question?
okay, well, that's a discussion really to have with the board then. And my other question, Lori, was that I've heard over the past 2 years that there's an issue with compliance with these I-ready tasks as the kids grow older. And I mean, are you still seeing that? And so how do you mitigate that? Or, is it, I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
like,
No,
how
it's
effective is this program as the kids kind of grow up and basically become pre-adolescents and adolescents and don't really want to do these?
Right. So that's a really good question. So we have seen that. When we give the assessment will show us students that rushed. So we can see, like, if they just clicked through and really didn't read because there's no way they could have read it and answered the question before they moved on to the next one. So it does show students who rush. And we did see a high percent of rushing, especially as you go up in the grades.
Right.
So not as many kids rush in K through 3, but then as you go up into 4, you see a little more, 5, you see a little more. In the middle school, rushing. a large percentage of rushing. So what we did last year was I met with the iReady team and I talked to them a little bit about this. So they gave some ideas about, getting students engaged in the why we give this assessment and what's the purpose of it and why it's important for their education. So what I did was I created PowerPoints for each grade. And basically I asked teachers before we give the assessment to please, go through these PowerPoints with the students and explain to them, why we give this assessment, why it's important, what kind of information it gives to your teacher. And then, of course, the kindergarten PowerPoint looks very different than the 6th grade or 7th grade PowerPoint. So all of the math teachers and the ELA teachers went through this with their students, and last year was the first year that we started these PowerPoints. Those were geared more to the COVID because we were giving this online and the students were at home. This year I changed the PowerPoints so that they were geared to in class, and we saw the number go down dramatically. We also talked to the teachers about active proctoring and how important it is to watch students while they're taking the exam. So this year, just from the preliminary data that I'm looking at, you can see a much lower number of rushing students.
Miss
Okay.
Ross has her hand up.
Sorry, thank you. Hi.
Hi.
I have 2 questions that I'm interested in finding out. My first question is, a lot of people often judge our district based on state assessments, and I know we didn't get to that part yet, but how often do you ever evaluate these assessments and how it correlates with the state assessments, such as the Regents, the 4th grade, 5th grade, the state exams, AP exams, IB assessments? Is there any correlation between the kids who are taking the iReady and doing, how does that kind of correlate? And how often do you evaluate that?
Carlos, do you want to take that? I have done correlations between the Fontes and Pinal Bass assessment and the state assessment, and there is a high correlation. That is something that we can share when we share the data.
Okay.
The problem is we don't have a lot of state assessment data at this time because of COVID.
I know, but I mean in previous years, because they've been using the iReady.
I've done it with the Fontes and Pinal
Okay.
data. And
We also,
it's a great question.
correct. And we also did prior to COVID-19, I think that we did also with iReady. We were able to find the correlation with the state assessments for intermediate and elementary level, like the grade 3 to ELA and math. We're able to do correlations on that. But the tests change. And also that's another thing. But we'll get to that when we actually do the presentation on the data. Remember that there's going to be a gap, but we had assessment that happened last year, and we probably will get that data back in another month or so. It's all still in SED's hands.
Okay.
At that time, we can actually look at the data and make the comparisons and maybe get the information from iReady to do some correlations.
Okay. I have one other question.
May I add to that as well? The iReady, there is a correlation to the standards. So it helps us know, are kids learning what they're supposed to know at that grade level? And as she mentioned, it is diagnostic. So if I'm taking the test at third grade on the standards that I'm supposed to know at that point of the year, and that's how it's a nice correlated assessment, because what kids are assessed on at the beginning are what they should know by that time. And then MOI, when they're given it again, the test is adjusting to what they should know. But if I am not there, the test is adjusts back to where I am and start me there. So it's diagnostic, it's personal, and it helps teachers to see, where children are progressing, because it definitely correlates to. It came out when the standards hit as an option for many districts to use nationally, to use to see and measure the standards that they're expected to know by the end of the grade. So there's a strong correlation that we can use this data. And then when they actually take the state assessment on those very standards, we can see before they even take it, the prediction of how well maybe some will do based on how they do on this test.
Okay. I have one other question pertaining to the amount of tests. I know Trustee Dragic was kind of touching on this as well, but it seems like as the children are getting older, is it necessarily beneficial for them to take so many assessments? And the reason I ask that is because when I'm looking at it, I was sort of counting the assessments, and some of them are given 3 times a year. We have the Pontus Pinel, we have the iReady. Then you include the state exams. It almost seems as if there could be about 16 to 18 days that we're doing assessments, which equates to almost a month of instruction. So I'm just wondering, is there any way we could possibly look into a more comprehensive assessment that could encompass everything at one time? Or has anyone ever looked into a way that we could try to find, especially for older grades as they start getting into the state assessments?
No, we have not, but that's a good question. And I get that a lot. That's just a question. Why do we assess so much? And there's no real quick answer to that. We know that as we're going through these assessments that they give us very good information and how they're needed to help us know where kids are in the different pieces of their development, like the phonemic awareness from the beginning of reading. So we just couldn't give a kid a book without knowing they know the sound. So they all, to me, still have a very good purpose, but yeah, it does seem like an awful lot of testing. But right now, I would have to say no. There is not one comprehensive test that does all of that.
Okay.
Second, and just as another way of just thinking about all the assessments, in the absence of these, the question then becomes, well, what do teachers know to teach? Or because that one shot, one done, do it all, everyone gets the same doesn't work. We shouldn't give all kids the same level, the same instruction if they're not at that level. That's not fair to them, and expect them to do well. And that was what was done historically. We didn't have differentiation. We didn't have levels. So the testing helps teachers know what to do, what to teach, who needs what, how to plan for it. So in absence of an assessment, even if we do a comprehensive something, we do need to have assessments to drive our instruction. And that data piece is what informs that. And so, but it's just an ongoing conversation that we continue to have that question, and no one's clearly been able to answer that, and even in the research, stop assessing. They all say you need some basis to know how kids are doing. And what happens with everyone being different, that makes the web bigger because then we have to plan differently to meet all of those needs. And that's the equity lens around how we deliver and meet the needs of kids, what kids need. So it's a loaded question. It's a good one. No, we as a district don't have one, but I don't know. Maybe that's coming. I hope, but not yet.
Okay.
I hope so too.
Maybe we could separate it from with the iReady. I know they give it 3 times a year, maybe 2 times a year, beginning and end, or is there maybe a way we could readjust the assessments we're already giving so that we can maybe not give it to them as frequently so that it doesn't take away from so much instructional time? I'm just sort of throwing it out there, trying to
I
get
hear
it.
you. I hear you. Yes. That is the
I'm with
balance
you.
we're trying to achieve. I hear you. It's a balance, and
I
we're
don't know
working.
if Miss Pam was trying to say something.
No, I was just waiting for you to finish, but thank you. Thank you for this information. I'm just wondering now if, now that we've heard the various assessments, will families ever get to see the examples of the results of their child's assessments and have that explained to them and what that means?
That's
Yes,
a great
that's
point.
important.
Thank you.
Can I answer that?
Sure.
Okay, that's a really important piece. So the parents will receive a parent report for the iReady by the end of the month.
Okay, that's iReady. What about the?
So for the Fontes and
Fontes-
Pinnell benchmark assessment system, parents are informed at parent-teacher conferences how their students are doing and what strengths and weaknesses they had shown on the assessment and how parents can support them at home.
Great. Thank
And
you.
I think one thing, when we do talk to the parents, Dr. Iverson, hopefully teachers are explaining more than, your level G. Like parents need to really understand what that means and highlight the strengths of the students and not just always the deficit, right? So
That was
we
my
wanna
next
change-
question. Thank you.
We
You
act-
covered it. Thank you.
we actually don't tell the parents the level, unless they have some knowledge of that. Because the Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessment system is really a teacher tool. It's to help the teacher drive her instruction. What we want the parents to understand is where their child is at and what things that the teacher is going to work on and what the parent can do at home. It's not so important to say that your child's at a level G and we only want you to read books at a level G, because that's very hard for a parent to understand. But I think parents can understand. I mean, absolutely,
I think parents can understand. I don't think it's hard for them. Yeah, I think we got to change that language.
It's definitely a
I
teacher
totally
tool.
agree that parents need to, we're testing their children. We're testing our children. And we should be able to have it explained to us that we understand so that we can help our children. I don't like to hear that it's too hard for them to understand. We're sending our children into the district to be taught. And so, the child knows one thing, the teacher knows one thing, but we can't leave the parent out of it. And so we need to understand that.
I'm sorry, maybe the way I said it.
Yeah,
But still, I still want to, if you tell me I'm a level G, explain to me what level G means. Not that, okay, just tell my child to keep reading the book. I want to understand what that means so that I can be a help to my child, not just the teacher knows this. Yes, it's a teaching tool, but it's being implemented to my child. Right. So I want to understand, as any other parent who's concerned, and I think we all are, want to understand what that means. And when you do that, it gives a level of transparency that we all can understand. Maybe we can't understand it to the T, but at least I can have something to reach for, and I can have something to reach for with my child. So I would like to have that better explained as a parent and as any other. If, like I said, if we're sending our children into the district, there's an understanding that we should have.
So what
Thank you.
teachers do is they show a grade level text to parents, and then they show the text that the student is reading at, and they explain what the student needs to do to move towards grade level text.
Right. I just think it was the comment you made that it was too hard for parents.
Yes, I'm sorry. I
So
didn't-
we're in Greenburgh, and Dr. Iverson will definitely make sure we do not have a deficit mind thinking of our parents. So that I think that was just something that Ms. DeAndrea said. But as an educator, sometimes you think education wise, but parents can learn anything. They can be a part of us. And that's what we want to promote, especially in this committee right here. And I see Erin Jacobson, her hand is up, so I'm going to mute myself.
Hi, thank you. As a parent, I have a newly introduced to the district kindergartner who saw the iReady on the screen and got very excited and saw Miss DeAndrea and was like, oh, I just saw her. And I have a third grader in ALP. And at least from what I can remember, we've gotten copies of the iReady information for our kids. It is blocked out in visual form to see where, I haven't gotten my youngest ones yet because she just started, but I've gotten my older ones to know where she ranks with other kids in her grade and abilities. And then it's usually come before parent and teacher conferences so that we're able to talk to the teacher about what the scores say. So I have personally never felt like we weren't informed. I've always, there was an iReady presentation, I think maybe spring last year, that kind of delineated what to expect with iReady when the reports came to you, which I thought was very helpful. And I feel like it's always been very transparent that like, this is just one way that we measure your child's progress. And I don't know if we talk to the teachers about whether they think there are too many assessments with 3 or whether that's the right number. I don't know. And I would trust the teachers to be the best judge of that because it's their time and energy being used. And then that's the information that funnels into their teaching. But for the most part, like my kids seem to be okay with them. I think they're valuable. I was able to see how my daughter progressed throughout the year and also see maybe where she slipped and maybe could use extra support. So I found them very helpful. So I think right now, at least from my limited experience with just my oldest being in 3rd grade, have felt like there was pretty good support around understanding how far to read into this assessment and that it doesn't capture everything that your student can and can't do. So I've been very supportive of it. And I think as long as we keep teachers as part of that conversation about whether they find it useful, then I think we're on the right track.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Lori, did you have any more slides or are we, I can't remember now the beginning.
I know.
We're almost, we have.
Oh,
Yes.
Okay, so Dr. Iverson, do you want me to talk about the professional learning communities?
Yes. So,
Okay.
I mean, there are different names for these PLCs. A data team is a PLC. Instructional leadership teams are PLCs. What they all are groups of when a team of teachers by department, sometimes by subject, by grade, come together to engage in discussion, discourse, analysis about students and student work to determine instruction. And the PLCs is where they learn and support each other. During these times as well, professional development can happen. So it's just a structure that we have here in Greenburgh that we use to have our teachers collaborate. And this is when they do this work we're describing, because they're teaching all day. During their planning periods is when they meet for their PLCs meetings to begin to discuss and look at assessments. So it's just a structure, why we do it, what it is, and why we do it. I shared and how often we do it. My push, and I'll talk more with principals about this, I find that this is sacred time. When we get busy in our schools, we can council meetings and we'll roll it over. And sometimes if the vision is not that this is important time for teachers to collaborate, this would be the first meeting that's council. So the I'm going to be sharing with them how we make sure we measure how effective these are, and then as well as hold these times sacred, because this is what drives why we're here and what we do, and we must continue to do that, especially to be able to have conversations like this with the community around what we're doing and how we know we're going to move Greenburgh to increase student achievement. So we have PLCs, and the board, I found out once arriving here, supported sending a team to send some years ago to get trained on this model of PLCs. That was the model of Richard DeFore, who's done a lot of work in how these things should be structured. But I will tell you, there are all different synonyms for them. They do all the same. So we'll continue this model. We're going to strengthen this condition of learning as one of our causal factors that we know need to happen. And I'm glad it's already in place. And I was excited to find out that the district even endorses stipends for the PLC leaders. So that's a commitment. I think the board put a stamp on to say, we think this is important. We're going to support you this way, because a lot of places that role is not stipend. So that's what I mean. Okay, so Carlos, why don't you get to yours? Unless there are questions. Okay, Carlos.
Good evening, everyone, again. And we are going to talk about the New York State assessments. The first slide shows what is called the elementary intermediate level tests. It's basically the assessing of the students in terms of the content area of ELA and math in grades 3 to 8. These assessments measure the specific knowledge of the students and meeting the standards. The standards are established by the state education department, and they are by grade level. So when we administer these exams, we need to follow all the guidelines from the state. There's a battery of questions. These assessments basically allow the teachers, once we get the results, and it takes a period of time getting the results from the state. Normally it's about, from the time that is administered to the results, about a couple of months or 3 months. So after we get those results, we actually have the ability to provide those records, those scores to the teachers, and they can actually identify the needs of the students, personalize their learning, and monitor their progress through the school year and plan for the following school year. This also identifies specific needs and students that need as what is called the academic support, the AIS, and it's mandated by the state as well. Any students that are not meeting the standard at level 3 in every grade level, they are supposed to receive some sort of support the following year. So our schools work very hard on this. They actually have teams in every building that go after all of this information and try to organize the work around supporting the students and supporting the academics. We have AIS teachers, AIS staff that are dedicated to identify and support those students. The next item is, you can move to the next slide, Lisa, is the grade 4 and the grade 8 science tests. These are specific tests that are administered to students in grade 4 and grade 8 also, to measure the meeting of the standards for science at the state level. Once again, these assessments are done following on the guidelines from the state. They are published every year and they're provided to all the administrators. And we just need to be in compliance with all these regulations and actions that are established by the state. This information is the foundation for the discussions in the department level. You know, the science teachers in grade 4, they get this data and they can actually plan for what can be done for the following grade level, and then how these students can be better prepared to get to the science 8 exams. So these are measures that are done once a year, and it's established and scheduled by the state education department. These are basic for the elementary and intermediate level. Any questions about this one? They are very straightforward. It happens once a year. And unfortunately, because of the COVID-19, we had a suspension on these assessments. We just administered this past year, this past spring, the assessment for 2020 school year, 2021. And we're waiting on those results so we can actually put those in the dashboard and start doing the analysis and share that data with our educators.
Carlos, do you know how these assessments, has the state said anything about how they will actually be graded? I mean, are they going to
So there are two components.
Okay,
there are two components. There is the scale, there is the raw score, and there is the scale score.
Right. Okay.
They will continue with the same practice. What is not clear yet, and we have some guidance now in terms of what is the schedule, is because now we are all in person. And if if they are going to provide with the same format that they followed before COVID-19, and maybe get us the results in the term of 2-3 months, or if it's going to take longer, what is the answer? We're still waiting. So it's still in process.
Do we also, as a school district, do we also receive the raw scores? Because I think the others are really curved to reflect the distribution of the scores. But I think it's important to also get the raw scores to actually, it's only with the raw scores that you can actually assess if there has been any loss in learning. So do we get both?
We get both. We get both,
Okay.
and we get is detailed data on the raw scores and also the scale score that determines the level. So when you see, as you remember, I show you those screenshots, not specific data at the prior presentation on the students' records or history of the assessments. It actually shows you what was the raw score in ELA and math, and the teachers use that information to do their instructional planning.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Any other questions, anybody? So the next item from the New York State assessments is the Regents examinations. These are crucial because this actually happen in the high school level, the secondary education. These exams are basically administered and organized under the authority of the Board of Regents, so the University of the State of New York, and is administered by the New York State Education Department. This process of the evaluation is basically to measure, and that's part of the manual of the administrator for every one of these assessments, is to measure the quality of the instruction and the learning that happen or have taken place in terms of each one of those courses. So high school students in grades 9 to 12 are required to pass these exams to earn their diploma. And this is very important and crucial because Part 100.5 is the regulations of the commissioner that determines what are the diploma requirements. There are 3 types of diploma. There is an advanced designation with Regents diploma. There is the Regents diploma, and there is the local diploma or the district level. Any school, however, is very important. Very few schools opt to do this. They can also administer approved alternative assessments in lieu of the Regents examinations. These assessments are, in most cases, there are other assessments like the AP exams that can substitute an exam in Regents level. More advanced, depending on the type of the school, depending on the type of program that you have, you can opt to choose one of these alternatives. Laser, could you click over the Part 100.5 diploma requirements, please? I want to show you first what is stated by the state in terms of all the requirements. Can do it. Yeah, go ahead. Should open.
Can you see the screen?
No, you're not sharing that. You're sharing just one.
Let me stop this. Okay.
You're just sharing one. Thank you, Laser. No
problem.
So this is the set of requirements that need to be followed in order to obtain a diploma, a Regents diploma, an advanced with a designation. We also have the biliteracy type of diploma, Regents diploma. All of these are basically mastered by our guidance counselors. They are the ones that meet with the students, that determine what is the plan for academics so they can meet the graduation requirements and also go in the track that is the most appropriate based on their progression in the courses. They need to complete at least these subjects in English, mathematics, US history and government science, and global history and geography. I'm going to go in more detail now in how is the composition of those region exams in the following slides. Can you also show us the link to the alternative assessments, the ones that can be used instead of the regions? Listen, the other link. And this is all official data that is available at the State Education Department. As you can see, you can use one of the Advanced International Certificate of Education, the AAC, for the English examination as a substitute. You can do the AP English Language and Composition. You can also do the IB English A1 standard level examination, and those are acceptable alternatives for the Regents diploma, but there is a minimum acceptable score. And this is all listed on the state website. You can go back to the presentation. So this, you can go back 1 second. These exams are administered 3 times a year. So they happen in January, June, and August. January is basically in the middle of the school year, and that's when they are completing probably, courses that are half year, and they have a Regents exam. They can actually take the Regents exam. They can complete the work for that particular academic course. In June is normally the full battery, all the different regions that are offered for the schools. In August is considered, during the summer, they can actually complete any requirements or get an advance. Mostly is completion or whatever they are missing to graduate. Next slide. Unless there is a question about this one. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
yes, Ms. Rose.
So you said that the regents start in 9th grade. I know some districts, they do regents in middle school too. Do we do that as well?
Yes, and that's part of the provisions on the state regulations. You can have an advanced program for students in middle school, and they can take Regents examinations at the end of their A grade in June. They are only allowed to do it in June.
Place of the state exams, or do they take the state exams and the regents?
It has been different through the years. There was before the provision that you had to take both, then it was changed. They could opt to take the algebra, for example, if they are advanced students, in lieu of the the mathematics A grade examination. And it depends on the year, it depends on the provisions that the state put out in the guidance. But the last year they allowed that extension that you could take the algebra if you were an A grader instead of the A grade math. But it has to be in the guidelines from the state, so we can actually make that provision.
Okay,
Dr. Iverson, you want to?
Sorry, no, that my hand's not up.
Oh,
Go
okay,
ahead.
sorry. Yeah. So, thank you. So students must pass at least 5 of these Regents examinations in core subject areas. In addition, they must earn the appropriate credits by passing the subject courses. So the exams are not necessarily, they are not necessarily tied to the courses, but the courses are conducive in preparation for these exams. And they have to meet the standards set by the Regents. Most of these Regents exams are 3 hours long. It used to be longer than that. One of the extensions is the Earth Science Regents, which has an additional component of 41 minutes for the labs. This can be done even before the exam, up to 2 weeks before the exam, and provides for the teachers to have some time of planning with the students so they can do the practical, they can do the lab work. Then there is another extension for the physics Regents, which is also only administered in June. As I mentioned, June is when you provide with a full battery of all of the exams for the students to take. The exams are given in January, June, and August, and the schedule for the next one is already published by SED, and that link that we will put in the website with this presentation. Advanced honors students in the middle school can take Algebra 1, US History and Government, Earth Science, and Living Environment Regents exams in June when they get to the A grade. Either one of these exams, depending on the program that they are following. Next slide. So What is coming next, and I think that Dr. Iverson can speak more to this, because we are working on preparation. We're trying to get all our data in a friendly format that can be discussed with the community, with the committees, with the parents, and the efforts that we put on this through the teams in every school building, through the work that is done with our literacy coordinators like Ms. DeAndrea, Diego Rendon, and other members of the team, is just to prepare so we have good data, meaningful data that can serve the purpose of instruct the children, but at the same time to inform the parents where they are. The best partnership is the partnership at home. And we need that to happen. And I know that our leader now is a true believer of that, and we're working on providing for that information. So coming next is we will have to discuss what our data is telling us, where we are, where we need to be. I turn to Dr. Iverson to complete this last slide. Thanks.
Thank you, Carlos. Well stated. And we're hoping when we have all this data, not only will it tell us how to inform our instruction in the classrooms and all, it will help from a district lens. And that speaks to your point, Trustee Washington, in terms of the data is looked at all levels. It's not just at the classroom level. I mean, at the district level, I look at that data and go through a cycle of analysis, just like classroom teachers, to determine at a high yield level, what should the district be focused on, so that we can build capacity of all our teachers around a strategy. And so when I say looking for a high yield strategy, this data, when we analyze it, will become clear to me around, to all of us as leaders, and I'll be meeting with the principals to identify if we had to find one high yield strategy that if we all worked on it, it possibly will be in math, because we have a lot of support in literacy. So as I've been getting around to the buildings and going in classrooms, you know who you talk to are the teachers. And the questions are, and the math teachers, especially at Bailey and the departmentalizing at the high school. So if you had to think about one high yield focus area in math, what would you think that we could all do as a district? Because all kids need it. It's just developmental. But if we do it, we can address many of the other standards and other skills. What would that be? So that's conversations I'm having with teachers as I'm in their classrooms and the halls, and they're giving me some good feedback. We're beginning to think about number sense. Number sense is a high yield, is a broad strand of math. It is part of the standards. Kids are tested on it. And it is a skill that tests whether kids know what to do when confronted with math. So you can see, so they get a problem. It could be a word problem. It could be an addition. It could be looking at numbers and just kind of having a sense on how to figure it out. That is really deep, high level stuff. So if we work with our teachers around that, we don't know if that's the one, we're going to look at the data on it. We think we will be able to then build some professional development and work with our teachers to build capacity around how you teach number sense to students. So the kid in third grade or fourth grade who's working with addition can know what operation to approach when they read a word problem or look at an algorithm and know what they need to do. It's a strong skill. So the data will be used at the systemic level to help us determine our focus as a district as we continue to impact instruction. And then you'll see it trickle in that distributive model of how it looks at the school level, and then to the teacher level, to the classroom level, to the student level. So that's how it goes. That's how improvement happens. It's not just at any one level, but we at the central office have a part of that as well to determine that. So that's what's next. I'm so excited. I'm looking forward to the data to see, because I've been looking at math and I've been asking very good questions around. So what have you been doing? What do we do in math? What do we focus on? And we don't have clear answers, to be transparent. We don't. I think our teachers are doing a good job, but we do need to look at the same level of direction in math that we're doing in literacy. So that's the next steps. Thirdly, we're going to be, as Trustee Jarczyk said, I've been given a directive to look at a lot of our programs we're using at the high school level at, Westchester Prep. We have I forget the name of the program, the Levine program. I'm drawing a blank. But
IB?
Yes.
IB?
Not no IB, but it's another program that's Levine
It
program.
was that essay writing program, right?
Right. That's
Yeah.
what is it called?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, right.
We just want to make sure our programs are effective.
And that TWR program that,
Yes.
right, we want to make sure they're all effective. Like
Yes,
that.
right.
That's exactly right. We're not looking to eliminate just for the sake of eliminating, nor are we looking to sustain something that's not working. So
Right.
the data will help us look at that. So, I mean, my plate is full. I'm excited about what I need to do and what we need to start doing, and we've begun. But with this data here is what's the baseline to determine that future around where the district will go. And please let me tell you that we're not talking about by all of this being identified and well in place by this year. This change of direction or change in practices and just transformation period takes time. Not as an excuse, but it takes time. But we will work on building our capacities as adults to do the work well and do it with fidelity so that our kids are exposed to the highest level of instruction in their classrooms by highly professional, competent professionals in the district. That's how we're approaching the work. So stay tuned, a lot more to come. We will be coming back throughout the year, sharing the good stuff with you around what we're doing in education. The board will hear some interesting things at the next board meeting, and there I'll wait to talk to them about that I'm gonna seek permission for the agenda to share around what we're doing around equal opportunity schools in terms of how it connects to how we are looking and identifying students for our higher level programs and to ensuring that level of equity exists in our district as well. Not eliminating anything, but assuring that all kids have that level of exposure if needed and if want to, with the support they need to be successful, because that is important as well. We don't want to set kids up to fail. So it's all of the above. A lot of things we're working on. And so this is just the beginning. We want to thank you for your attention and the patience, because we had a lot of slides. We knew a lot of text and content, but I thought it was worth it to at least take time to explain so you know what we are doing that is very valuable right now in the district. And thank you, Mr. Andrew, for what you do, and Carlos and I have enjoyed working with you and as well the Board of Trustees. So we'll leave it for questions. Trustee Dragic, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. So I really want to thank all three of you, Dr. Iverson, Carlos, Lori. That it was really terrific to really get this sort of deep dive into the purpose of these tests, and so it's great that we're going to get a follow-up with the actual results and the data analysis. And I guess one of my questions is when should we expect that so that we can kind of plan the next meeting around that?
Okay. When is your next meeting? Do you have a date already?
I do not have a date. I kind of
Okay.
Well, actually, my first year, I had them set, and then with COVID, I kind of rolled with the punches. And so now I'm just, I'm still in my COVID mode. So I haven't set the next one. So if you tell me when you expect the data, then I think I can already plan the next one and give everyone a heads up.
Okay, I'll meet with Carlos and Lori. I would think before the holidays, of course.
Right.
Definitely, yes.
Definitely sometime the end of November, beginning of December.
Yeah, I was thinking, before the holiday. Yeah,
Okay.
because that's when the first quarter is done, and we're trying by then have some data. Yes.
Okay, so then the other thing I wanted to request was that if you would ask Laser to make a tab somewhere on our website to actually post these presentations. I think that would be really terrific. And with the understanding that really over the past 2 years, I have had requests from parents continuously to see the actual data, to be able to sort of have a big picture of how we're doing and how we could do, where we're doing well and where we could do better. And then my last request, I don't know if Erin is still here, maybe not. But she has been requesting, and she's right, that we should also post our SCL. So I know we didn't talk about SCL this time, but but we've spoken about this, Dr. Iverson, if there's a way of posting our SEL resources, especially for this year, because it's obviously a difficult year for kids, and parents could use all the guidance they can get to reach out and to know what SEL resources the district is actually offering.
Yes, we could do that. And Laser's on the call, and I will follow up to assure that the presentation is posted and the data, I agree with you, should be posted. It should be on the site.
Right.
You can see it by
Right.
grade level. And so, we'll work on that, absolutely. SEL is something we are working on. We don't have a systemic program. We are looking at a couple. They're just very, very pricey. And most of the models are models where you send out a team who are trained in it and bring it back and then build that capacity, that trainer to trainer turnkey sort of program. And we know we need it. We are right now, what I will tell you is happening. Every school submitted, and I can send this to the Board of Trustees. As part of the Superintendent Conference Day, we did spend time on SEL, and every school had to complete a next steps planner for how they were going to approach it in their buildings day one. And so there are activities going on in every school to assure students are checked in, are being checked on. I have a place to go, a person to talk to, and just so those kinds of caring, taking care of, watching our kids is in place. Yesterday, we talked about, we were another call, Second Step Social Skills Program is now in the lower grades. This is an SEL program. It's very pricey. I'm not surprised we don't have kids because it's developmental, and it is pre-K through 12th grade. And what it does, it gives kids the language around how to handle a lot of those skills and problem solving and emotions that you just start having developmentally because you live and you're moving around and you're experiencing life and COVID. And it helps them process, give them tools and language around how to process that through these little vignettes, like skits, and through examples. And so the lessons are 20 minutes. And I've used it before, guidance counselors and psychologists are usually those who deliver it. We don't give it to teachers because that's something else they can't plan for. They're teaching instruction. But when the lessons are done, they're in the classroom where teachers are there, they can hear the language, so that what happens if you do it well over the years, you start hearing kids use the language. When they see a child crying, they'll go over to them and show some empathy towards them. It teaches caring. And that's what we need right now. So I'm looking at, it's called Second Step. And Trustee Washington, maybe you've heard of it, but it is an excellent program in helping to build a culture around SEL. So we know that we are looking at some, it's just everything comes with a price. So, but without a price, we're using our own resources, our guidance counselors, psychologists, our teachers, and like I said, plans that they have come together and said, this is what we're going to do for our students. So we are approaching it, but that's just where we are. I'll keep you posted around that.
Okay, great. I
So
think
I too-
Trustee Jamal wants to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I too wanted to thank everybody for tonight. I definitely appreciate everything that you guys have shared. It was very comprehensive and understanding how we're assessing students. But something that I'm going to continue to bring up on this committee is students. Like there's a lot of communication around what the state wants and what we've decided is important locally. I did not hear a whole bunch that some of how much things are being driven by students' desires, by students' interests, and centering a lot of the focus on the way that students are developing, a love of learning. So that there was a point where we talked about a particular assessment where students were just running through it really fast. There are things that if we do ahead of time that help them fully understand why it's so important. And I heard, it mentioned that some of the things that we were doing, but if the students was interested in the content on the particular assessment, maybe they don't run through it so fast. So having that type of information documented is something that I'm seeing many of the most innovative districts in the country do. And I'm hoping that that's something that we can bring to Greenburgh Central School District.
So Trustee Jamal, I agree with that. We need to bring some joy into our classrooms, but I was also wanted to say that maybe we can, as a district, we can actually do some empathy interviews of our students, because Ms. Ross brought up just in reference to how many, the tests and assessments are going on. We could do empathy interviews with the students to see how they feel about the actual assessments, or how they feel about just coming back into school, how they feel about reading, how they feel about math, and even some empathy interviews of the teachers who are actually administering these assessments. They're the ones that could tell us also, with that data, how many assessments we truly need within the classroom. Is it like Trustee Dragic said, is it just too much? Are you losing time of teaching? How do we know students are really learning? What data are we using to show that, to see if students are really learning? So maybe we can create some empathy interviews for students that will also talk about what Trustee Jamal said. Where's the joy in the class? Where's the joy in school? And where's the joy with just in these assessments? So I think that's great. But I do want to say, Dr. Iverson, I want to commend you, because I think it's been about maybe the last 4 meetings we have had, and we have had presentations from you personally, the technology team, even the special education one by Jill Post, and tonight. It's a level of professionalism, transparency. You are saying, well, either I don't know, I do know, we can try to do this, we will do this, this is my plan. And I think that level of transparency is something that is very refreshing. So I just want to commend you and the people that are supporting you at this time. Thank you for bringing data to Greenburgh. Thank you for allowing us to know who we are as a school district. And I know we're going to continue with our identity and getting to know who we are on a whole nother level as a school district. So I just wanted to commend you. Thank you, Dr. Iverson.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate hearing that. I thank you. And
I second that.
thank you so much for the support. I love it. I'm very happy to be here. And the work, we're enjoying the work. And I have an excellent team. So I thank you. I'm looking forward to showing you that we are going to be that state-of-the-art district. So thank you. I appreciate that, Trustee Washington. I really do.
We believe that. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming to this meeting, and we will schedule the new one soon.
Yes.
And
well, I'll let you
food
know.
for thought.
I'll let you know when the data is ready. And like Trustee Washington said, we'll be around November, maybe right after Thanksgiving, before Christmas, though. The end of around the 3rd, because that's when the quarter ends.
Sound good. Thank you so much. Thank you again.
Enjoyed it.
Good
everybody.
Good night.
Have a great
night.
This is wonderful. Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good
Thank
evening,
you.
everyone.